Hello, everybody again. Our last presenter of the day is from West Virginia Division of Forestry, Johnny King. Johnny?
Thank you, Wayne. So, best for last, right, guys? So, forestry's tough. Forestry stuff is it's a lot of science, it's a lot of math, it's a lot of terms. Forestry is a really, really vast subject. So, to make it a little easier, I'm going to go over a couple of the things concept-wise that you want to see for the written part of our test. So terminology-wise. So some of the things to consider would be different types of harvest. So it'd be like a clear cut in comparison to a shelter wood or a seed tree. What are the benefits and disadvantages of a clear cut, right? And talking about the same thing with harvesting, we're also talking about logging laws and regulations. So in West Virginia, that's the Logging and Sediment Control Act, 91-92. In that, there's best management practices for loggers. What we'll do a lot of the times is we'll use some information from that and say what are loggers required to have license-wise, or what are they required to do environmental-wise. We might also take some of the things that you're going to practice at today and utilize some of the tables and charts that you would see in the BMP manual and utilize that on the test itself. Another thing we might go over law-wise would be maybe there are wildfire laws, so smoky bear prevention, but we actually have fire seasons in West Virginia and when they are and what the laws that tie in with those. So we have a little bit of law just like DNR does. A couple other things we might have would be some stuff on invasive species. So when I say in forestry, and we're talking about invasive species, we're not only talking about plants, we're also talking about animals as well, right? So if we were talking about invasive species like the emerald ash borer, EAB, really, really devastating for West Virginia's forest here lately. That might be something that we would tie in. There might be invasive plants like autumn olive or stilt grass or tree of heaven, right? Be able to identify invasive species. If we had a little picture or if we had an example, be able to identify those. You'll also be required to do a lot of tree ID. But we'll go over tree ID probably at the end. It'll be a different little section of this. We'll deal with that here momentarily. A couple other things would be some ecological concepts. So if I said succession, does everybody know what succession is? How a forest turns from open fields over time turns back into a forest, and what wildlife might benefit from that. You can see there's a little bit of tying in. Forestry is so broad that, a little bit of aquatics and watersheds could be put in there. We do topo map reading. So to be able to read a topo map, be able to do the very basic math that would go along with that, right? If I gave you one elevation and another elevation down here, what's the difference in those elevations? Easy subtraction, right? If I gave you a point here and another point here, and I said, what's the distance between those two lines on the topo map? There's a scale bar down there, right? So you should be able to measure and multiply. There's a little bit of basic math throughout our test that you'll see. A couple other things would be riparian zones. That could be an important word or phrase. Habitat of different kinds. We had cerulean warbler for a long time, right? That was something that we use commonly. Keep in mind, just like some of the other speakers said, that forestry is going to be located where we are for that year. So if it's high elevation that year, if we're over in Cowan, or if we're in maybe Cacapon or Canaan Valley, is going to be different if we're down in Jackson's Mills. The elevation changes what species we have. It might change what we decide to talk about. If we find an area that has hemlock woolly adelgin, we're going to go, ooh, look, hemlock woolly adelgin. There's another little thing we can talk about and throw into the test. So where we're located could really matter on how we go about writing it. The big things that I want to go over today, though, and first off, I want to say all these concepts and things, because I went over them very quickly, right? I just kind of threw some stuff for you to look at. It's all on our website. It's on the West Virginia Envirothon website. If you go to the bottom, there's aquatics, forestry, wildlife, soils. You click the forestry section, there's links for all this stuff. It's very easy to find. We want everybody to do well, so we make things as easy as possible. It's a tough subject. What they're also going to have to do is be able to perform specific tasks that foresters do on a daily basis. One of those is going to be trying to find the volume of trees. To find the volume of trees, you're going to have to be able to use a diameter tape. You also have to use a Biltmore stick. We'll also provide volume tables. You'll gather information from using these tools, put them in the volume table. It works just like a multiplication table. Diameters on this side, heights on this side, you match them up, it gives you a volume. Real easy math, right? Real easy. So we're going to go over how to utilize these tools and how you're going to do that. Also, we're going to go over pace, stepping, and pacing. So that's how a forester goes about measuring without having to use a ruler. So we're going to practice that today, and we're also going to do a little bit of slope. I know that they did that in the soil section, but we're going to go over it again anyways, just because we don't know what they went over. We want to make sure everything gets covered properly. So does it sound good, everybody? Okay, let's go out and have a little bit of fun, do some hands-on stuff. Using your pace to measure out certain distances. So it's very common that foresters have to take plot samples. Well, those samples in the forest, whenever we're taking samples to see what the forest is like, they have to be a certain distance apart. It's that little bit of science and math to make sure we're not being biased and we're getting good samples. One of the ways we do that is by using our pace to make sure all the plots or our samples are a certain distance apart. Nobody wants to carry a tape out through the woods and through the brush and everything else. So one of the ways to do that is you can actually lay down anything. We just use flagging and some pencils. And we measured out 100 feet. So we also measured out one for 66 feet. Does anybody know why we laid out one for 66 feet? No? Back in the day for surveying, and this is an important forestry term too, 66 feet is one chain. So when we go to use our Biltmore sticks to get our tree heights, we're actually going to have to pace away 66 feet away from that tree, or one chain. So we might even have a little math problem or something on the test that would say, well, how many feet is this many chains, right? Little way to prove that you have that terminology down pat. So, for taking your pace, I was taught, and so was Andy, was taught step. Whenever you do a step, that's one step. Pretty complicated stuff, right? I know, complicated. So, a pace is 1, 2. See that? That's a pace. So everybody learns differently, and it's okay if a teacher teaches step over pace. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as they're able to do the math, right? As long as you can do the math, there's no problem doing step or pace, okay? So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna have everybody line up here momentarily, and I want everybody to start at this line, and we're gonna pace or step. Let's go with step now, because it's a little easier for now, okay? And everybody's gonna step until they get over to the farthest ribbon. Keep track of how many steps. So 1, 2, 3. When you get to the other end, I wanna know what your individualized step is. Has everybody got that?
So we're going all the way to the 100 or the 66?
You're gonna go to the 100, okay. The far one. So everybody line up here for me. Come on. Okay.
So
All right. And I said race, but it's not really a race. All right. So nobody goes shuffling real fast or nothing. So just take your time. And actually, you want to step in the way that it's natural. This needs to be a repeated process, right? So I want everybody to go ahead and start stepping. So you're counting your steps until you get over to the next ribbon. Stay straight lines, okay? So. All right, so be honest, who lost count? Nobody? Oh, you're doing good. All right, so you remember how I said this needs to be a repeatable process? So I'll tell you what, let's go back and see if you get the same number. So give it another try. 3, 2, one, go. So did everybody get the same number? Oh, I'm seeing head nods and head ups. Yep. So how far off were you?
First one was 46, the second one was 48.
Okay, what'd you get?
44, but it was 44 and a half, I think, the first time.
And that's common, that happens. 48 both times?
45%.
Okay, look at this confidence you see here. Okay, so grab your calculators. And we're gonna do a little bit of math. Okay,
It's a lot of pressure.
It is.
so we're gonna do a little bit of math. The students and participants are provided calculators during the competition. It's mostly to be used for the volume and things like that, right? However, I'm saying that they have a calculator, but they need to know their individualized pace or step before they come to the competition. We'll have a practice session where they'll be able to practice and make sure they still have it in tune. But if they're coming and they don't have this down pat yet, it's not a good sign. So, all right, so what you're going to do is we actually have a known distance, right? So what was our known distance?
100 feet.
100 feet. So we're going to take 100 and we're going to divide that by the individualized step or pace that you had. Yeah. So your pace was, or your step, so the 100 divided by,
2.27, 44. 100 divided by 44.
and what'd you get?
2.27 repeating.
2.27, good.
2.22.
2.083.
Okay.
2.12.
Good. So I know my individualized pace this time was 2.38. So mine's always been 2.3 something. Always that little fraction of points, right? So that's what you're looking for. We tried it earlier and Caitlin got 2 even. It's real easy to do math with, right? So let's repeat this same process, right? But we're going to do another known distance. We're going to do this again for one chain. Remember our 66 feet. So let's line up. And let's go to our closer flag there and do the same thing. Good job, one chain. So take 66, divided by the number of steps or paces it took you. And what'd you get?
2.27.
Good. And what'd you get? Are you still
I
working
don't
it
know.
out?
Probably the same as last time.
Okay. Good. So what this should come out to be is somewhere close
Yeah.
to the same thing you had on the 100 foot, right? So pay attention. Really, when it comes to memorization and we're talking about pacing and stepping for that chain, they're going to have to use it whenever they do tree heights. Really what the kids need to know for that section is just what their individualized pace or steps that it takes to get to 66 feet. If they're struggling with math, really, they just need to know that number, right? Now, it gets a little tougher. So here in a moment, we're going to mess with the clinometer and we're going to do slope. It's common that we might say, well, here's a stake here and here's a stake here where we're going to do our slope. We might ask, what is the distance between those two stakes? Oh, the math just got a little tougher, right? So now it's an unknown distance. So how do we solve for that? Just turning the math problem around.
How many steps multiplied
By,
the 2 point?
yes. So it's how many steps it took you times what your individualized pace or step is. So let's give that a try. Let's everybody line up to this stake here, and we're all going to pace down there and see if we can't get the distance this time.
Do
Yeah.
we all need to do the same line?
So you guys are nailing it. So in forestry, are we always in this nice, flat, perfect world?
Absolutely not.
No, actually when I was in competitions when I was in high school, it's very common they dig a hole or throw a stick in your way or whatever.
A log.
Picture doing this in a whole bunch of really thick brush. It's tough. Try doing it whenever there's a tree just nails right in your way and you got to go around it. Or there's a steep holler. So it's common that we will have that problem. It's whenever you're practicing your pacing and stepping, you need to practice it in many different places as possible in different ways. It is natural for people to take a larger step when they're going uphill than when they're going downhill, they'll take a smaller step. What I used to do with high school kids, I would take where the school was, it was in the middle, and of course it's West Virginia, there's hillsides. I'd have them walk up around the school, back down the other side, and back around where they came. They had to go up and down several times. It's a really good way to practice for the kids. So, yes, you are right. Now it is not flat. As long as you're staying in a straight line, you don't want to zigzag or go diagonal, you'll be fine. So let's give it a try. 1, 2, 3, go. All right, remember your number, then try it again on the way up. Remember, we're going uphill, so it's a little tougher. So 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so remember, this time we're solving for the distance, right? So you're going to take your individualized pace or step. If you're a little off, choose one of those numbers that seemed more accurate earlier, and times that by how many paces or steps it took you to get between stakes. Your individualized pace or step times the number it took you. So I'll give you guys a moment on that. What'd you get? 52.21. 52.2. 0.72. What did you get?
62.56.
Okay.
55.38.
Okay. So we actually measured it out. It's actually 50. So you guys were a little closer than you guys. But this is something that you're not going to figure out in a day or a couple times of doing it. It takes repetition and practice. By the time you practice it a whole lot, your actual individual pace or step is actually going to change a little bit. You'll get it dialed in, right? Once you have it dialed in, then when you do this math, you'll be much more accurate. All right? So that's pretty much how pacing, stepping, and measuring distances works for the Envirothon. All right, good. So, you guys went over this a little bit in the soil section, correct? So what is this tool called?
Started with this.
Yeah, a clinometer, okay? Clinometer, right? So this is the tool that we use for slope. You remember I talked earlier that maybe some of the logging best management practices have to do with slope. So if I said I had a 20% slope, how many water bars would be required? Or what's the distance between water bars? That'd be a logging regulation that you would see in the BMP manual that we might provide a table like that, right? So it's just an example. So what I want you guys to be able to do is, of course, use the clinometer to get the slope. What we'll always do is we'll have a stake, 2 different stakes, one going uphill, one downhill, or around the hill, however we feel like doing it. And yes, we have been known to put it across the drain, right? So you guys have to pace it off. But we want you to be able to use the clinometer and shoot that. Now, sometimes the stakes can seem a little funny. You can always have teammates or partners that know how tall they are to somebody else. So if I stood next to you, right? So I can see how tall she is. She comes to about here on me. So when I look down there, if I'm on the other side, that's the area you're going to be looking for. You want to match up where your eye would be on somebody else's. If you have 2 people of similar heights, they can stand right there and shoot that. What's a little easier, because we always measure our stakes, is you can lay it right on the stake and shoot for the top of the other stake, right? If you look at the side of your clinometer, it actually has a little gauge on it, and it has 2 different directions. What that is as I tilt that, you can see it's changing the slope. Did they talk to you in soils about how to decide if it was in percent or degrees?
You said one was on one side, one was on
Yes.
the other.
Yeah.
So if you actually look through your clinometer and you look all the way down, and you might have to look back up just a little bit, you'll see a percent sign on one side. So on these clinometers, the right side is percent, the left side is degrees. So make sure the students or the participants know to watch out if we're asking for degrees or we're asking for slope, because that's going to make a difference, right? So since you guys have already done this a little bit, I'm going to have each of you try, but I'm going to demonstrate first, okay? So I'm going to hold it using this little golden part here. I'm going to be looking through it, and I actually want my answer to be in percent. So I'm going to be looking at the gauge on the right side of the clinometer, right? So I'm going to hold it here, and I'm going to look down. And it's easier if you keep both eyes open. And I'm going to match those up until I come up with a percent that I'm happy with for percent slope. So I want everybody to give it a try. Keep your answers to yourself, and then we'll see and we'll compare. So everybody give it a try. Yep, turn it around. There you go.
That's a really
So
small.
it's a little easier if you keep both eyes open. And you remember that height issue, so if you hold
Yeah.
it here, you'll be a little bit more accurate. Okay, so as you look, you'll see the white bar with all the little tick marks,
Yes,
right?
I see that. Okay.
So you'll be looking at that, and then through it, kinda, over to the stake. There'll be a horizontal line that you want to match up with the top of that stake. And if it takes you a moment, it takes you a moment. It's okay. You're coming up with
Someone
kind
else
of a
give it a
number.
try.
Yep. So let's have somebody else try it. Have everybody give it a try.
I'm gonna struggle with that thing.
Everything takes practice. And every tick mark
You're
is,
supposed to look
represents
straight
one.
and keep both your eyes open, I think. Then.
Yeah, so look through this eye
Oh.
into there, and then kind of like blurry vision, look past it, and then you should be able to see both things. It's kind of like if I hold this eye and hold this eye, how I see a little differently.
Yeah.
You'll be able to see through both. Okay? And your turn.
Could you say it again about the website?
Yes. So I know this is tough to see. So if you guys go to the West Virginia Envirothon website and click on the Forestry link, there's information here that'll actually show you what that gauge looks like in real life.
Well, I can see the gauge, but I sure can't find a stick.
Okay,
Yeah.
same thing, just like your daughter there. So what did you guys get? You want to try it again?
Yeah, but
Okay.
you can keep going.
So what did you guys get as an answer? So,
I don't know,
and
I
you can
saw
say it out
0.
loud now, it's okay.
22.
22, 15,
I don't know. I just saw the 0. It was right around. I don't know.
okay.
I was done
Pretty
right.
flat. It doesn't look flat.
See the numbers
Yeah,
That is
so you're
weird
getting,
to get your vision to like.
Yeah,
It
it
is
was
tough.
really like.
Ooh, that's weird.
You're holding it up. You're
Yeah,
holding
that's
it
what I
at
was
an up
thinking.
angle.
so if it's downhill from us, that means you naturally should probably be facing down a little bit, right? Yeah. So you can get the gauge here on the side. So you can see the gauge, and it shows what slope that she's actually looking at, which is really helpful for teachers and advisors to see what their kids are actually looking at. You're getting about the right answer
I,
now.
I see
Yeah.
the nu-
Also have a
I see the
teammate
numbers,
look at
but I
the
don't
look at the side of the
see-
thing.
Yes, good
Okay,
point,
and
Andy.
then keep your numbers to yourself, and then compare the
Oh,
numbers
there it
that
is.
way.
idea.
Oh, you're getting it?
Yeah, I see
Okay.
it now.
You
So
know.
what are you getting?
Well, I heard 20, so I went up to that, and so now it kind of it's like 25. So it's at,
Okay, that's the danger of hearing everybody else's answers.
yeah.
So it's more like close to the 15. It's like 14 or so. So very good. Now on the
least I can
slope
see, I
portion of the test, we actually have a little bit of a variance, right? So you can be off a degree or so and it still be a right answer. So let's say, you know, the answer was 14. With her being 15, it's still a right answer. This takes practice. Another way to practice for teachers and advisors is that, you notice we have a clinometer down on the other side too. they can shoot up and down towards each other using the clinometer. One's just a positive reading and the other one's a negative reading, right? So flat positive, negative, right? So it's a good way that they can practice. It takes time. Remember that you can look in the website and there's information that you can use for that. Don't get too tore up about this part of the exam. It's not worth as many points as other parts, right? So keep that in mind. Don't worry about too much. All right, so grab your Biltmore sticks and your D-tapes. What we're actually going to get into now is actually tree measurements. Whenever foresters go through the woods and we evaluate how much a forest is worth or how much a tree is worth, we have to take measurements, right? So, first off, what we really need is the diameter of the tree, right? Now, I said forestry is a science. That means we got to keep ourselves from being biased all the time. We have to make sure we're doing things in a scientific way. So, when I measure on the tree, it's very easy for somebody to measure up high or measure low. We want everybody to measure in the same place, right? So we get a good, accurate reading. So what that place is actually 4.5 feet from the uphill side of the ground. What we call that in forestry is DBH, diameter at breast height. But I tell you what, I'm not the tallest guy in the world, and my chest might be a different height as somebody else's, right? That's why it's actually 4.5 feet from the uphill side of the tree. Now we're all measuring in the same place. So I know naturally from doing this long enough that 4.5 feet on me is about right here. So you can make it a fun little game. All of the students can measure and see where 4.5 feet are on themselves. The next step, and this is using the Biltmore stick, would be to come over and actually from the uphill side, 4.5 feet, I would hold this stick on the diameter side 25 inches from my eye. Pretty complicated, right? If you look, there's an actual ruler on your Biltmore stick that will help you gauge what this height is. From there, I'm going to keep myself centered. Move the stick, not my eye or my head or anything. Move the stick over to where this side of the stick, my left, is actually in my eye with the left side of the tree. From then, my eye on the right side of the tree will give me the reading for the diameter. Boy, that was complicated, wasn't it? There's a lot of human error that can be involved. I could be on not the uphill side. I could be measuring the wrong height, right? 4.5 feet. I could have it too far or too close to my eye. A lot can go wrong. You can get diameter with this, but a little hint from the Envirothon forestry people, this tool is not used for that. It can be, but what we really want you to use is this little tape measure. This is a magical little tool. It does the math for us. So if I took this little tape measure, and I threw it around this tree, and I measured at 4.5 feet, what would I really be measuring? If I was talking about a circle, I'd be doing circumference. Very good. The neat part about this, I need a diameter. This little tape measure will actually, when I throw it around there and it looks like I'm measuring circumference, it's doing the math for me and will give me a diameter reading. Be careful with your students. They will actually use the wrong side of the tape measure. If you look, one side is in inches and the other side actually says diameter, right? We will very commonly get 60 inches. That means we had a big tree, right? That means that it was actually a 5 foot wide in diameter tree. That's not what we gave them at all, right? So make sure not only do they understand that the tape's used for that, but understand what a bad answer is, right? Make sure they're not using the inches, they're using the diameter tape side. So I'm gonna throw this around again, making sure that I use the diameter side of the tape. I'm gonna hold it over, and if you wanna zoom in with the camera, let me turn this upside down. What you're gonna actually see is how we read these diameter tapes. So this little mark right here is actually our indication line. So that mark coming down, you can see it's close to the 15, but it has not passed it. Can we create more wood out of thin air? No. So it's going to be 14. So for the West Virginia Envirothon, we'll actually let you be off of that an inch or so, right? So if the answer was 14 and you put 15, it's still a right answer. If you put 13, it's still a right answer. Keep in mind though, remember you're going to use these numbers for future math problems. So if you're off, that can change your math in the end. So that's how you guys are going to get diameter, using the diameter tape. You can do it with the Biltmore stick, but we prefer that you use the diameter tape. It eliminates the human error. So I want everybody to give it a try using the Biltmore stick, because I want you to know how to do it, and then we'll show you what's the easy way with the diameter tape. All right? So come on down, give it a try. One at a time. You're on the uphill side, good. 4.5 feet on me is right here. So a little higher, about here. Okay. So hold your stick up. Now you're gonna have the diameter side. It's easier if you hold your thumb, one hand, in the middle of the stick. There you go, good. So hold it against the tree. I'll measure for you. It's nice to have buddies, right? Teammates. Make sure you're 25 inches from your eye, and you are. So what you're gonna be looking for is muscle memory, that that's how far away you'll be from the tree every time. Okay. The next step is to make sure you line this side of it with your eye, so that side of the tree, and then the other side, where does it come out on the stick, along these bars. So these are the numbers that you're looking for.
I'm gonna get like 13.
Okay, so 13 is a good number. So let's have somebody else give it a try. Remember your number. Sure. Good. And then 25 inches from your eye. So I'll hold my ruler here for you. You're a little far away, so you can get a little closer. A little too close. Back up a little bit. There you go. Remember, you're going to try to remember that for your muscle memory, right? So then pull the stick over where in your eye, this part is in line with this side of the tree. Okay. Then once you have that, where you see it come across your eye here, will be your answer.
Okay, that was 13.
Okay, good. Next.
Okay.
So, keep in mind, the way that I just showed you guys that, if I was dealing with a really oblong tree, is every tree a perfect circle? No. When I threw this around the tree, it took into consideration the full shape of that tree. When you guys measured with a Biltmore stick, you measured from one side. So could that tree be narrower from that one side than other sides? Absolutely. So you'd want to go around the tree measuring several times and then average what you got to come up with your answer when you use the Biltmore stick. Once again, more human error possible with this than with this. This is a much easier tool to use for diameter breast height, right? Okay, good. All right, so the next thing we're going to learn is to actually get the merchantable height of the tree. Now, when I say that, am I just saying the full height of the tree? No.
You can't sell that little tip.
Right. So I'm actually gauging what this tree is worth. So I want the usable material within that tree. So when we talk about measuring that, we're actually going to measure it in number of logs. Well, how long's a log, right? So in the competition, it's going to be 16-foot logs. So then what's a half log? 8 foot, right? So if everybody looks at your Biltmore stick, and if you turn to one of the narrower sides, it actually says merit hypsometer. Of course, the meter part means it's measuring tool, and the hypso part means it's actually a height meter. If you look along that scale, you'll see it says 1, 2, 3, and so on. That's how many logs that you're measuring on that side of the scale. You can see these individual sticks don't have half logs on there, but we do grade and measure in half logs. All right, make sure your students are aware of that. So, to use this tool, you're going to have to be one chain away from the tree. Does everybody remember how to be one chain away from the tree? Confident, right? So let's all line up, and then I want you to pace towards the pink flag there, back and see how far 66 feet is for you. Don't be shy, come on.
I'm trying to remember which number. You had us measure 3 different distances.
Do you remember what your pace was? For your step.
Oh yeah, then I can figure that out.
Then you can multiply, right? Or divide. So if you have to take a moment to do the math, you can do the math.
Well, I thought I had mine now. I'm thinking maybe I picked the wrong one.
Need a calculator. So remember,
Again, one chain is 66.
it's going to be our known distance, which is what? 66, one chain, divided by, well, I guess, yes, divided by your individual pace.
Okay.
That'll give you how many you have to step away. Got it?
Yep.
We're good? She's going to work hers out. And a really keen part to this one, I want everybody to do this, but don't just stop where your buddy stops, right?
Yeah.
It's very common for people to do that. Stop where you know the answer is, okay? So, and remember, we're going to aim up the hill towards the flag there. You never want to go too far down the hill or up the hill. You want to kind of come across as flat as you can.
What flag?
The ones on the ground right there by Andy. So,
It's not a flag, is it?
right. So, it's flagging. So, 1, 2, 3, go ahead. Oh, very good. I'll give you a high five. So, very good. So, you notice we're all a little bit off, right, of each other. That's because we need a little bit of practice. But if you two would come back this way, that's a little bit closer to an answer. Then let's just make sure we're all gauging from the same point, right? So our tree was the one right there in the middle. Does everybody remember which one it was? Okay. So the way to use this part of your Biltmore stick is you're going to turn it to the merit hypsometer side, the height meter, right? Turn it to the height meter side. At the bottom, you will notice there's a little tiny arrow. That little arrow is going to be held 1 foot from the base of the tree. That's to leave the little stump that a logger would leave, right? So we're going to hold this up with that part facing us, holding the base of the stick 1 foot from the ground, or from the base of the tree. And you also want to try to hold this 25 inches from your eye. So you want to gauge that. Keep your sticks up. I'm going to come through and measure what 25 inches is. That way we can tell if you guys are being accurate. So, good. So what you want to do is take your other shoulder and put it away a little bit. It'll make you stretch. Other way. There you go. That makes you stretch a little bit. So just so the teachers and everybody can catch for the video. When you have kids with a little bit shorter arms, one of the ways to counteract that is to have them to rotate their shoulder. That takes their head and pushes it back farther from the stick. So now you're good. So you can stand back up. Okay, so I'm going to measure 25 inches from your eye. You're good. Next. 25 inches from your eye. So stretch out a little bit more. A little bit more. And on lining with that tree, where does your eye point at? Let's say, does everybody see there's 2 limbs that come out to the left, and then there's 1 limb right above that that points back towards us. Does everybody see that? And if you don't, please tell me.
Oh.
Okay, so I'll guide you up here. So if you look, you see those 2 really dark parallel limbs that kind of come out to this side. So there's 1, 2, 3. Yeah. On above that, there's 1 that points right towards us.
Oh yeah, I did see.
So that's the one I want you to look at. Do you see it? Good. So do you guys see it as well? All right. So where does that point on the tree cross with your stick? What number is it closest to? No, it should be more up here.
All over the place.
So your eye would be going up there, right?
Wrong brand.
So there's 3 branches. 1, 2, 3 are all coming out in that direction, and 1 coming back this way.
Okay. 3.
There you go. 3 is close to answer.
I'm getting like 2.5.
Okay, 2.5. That's fine. So what did you guys get? 3. 4. Okay. So the answer is more like 3. Whenever, bragging. So whenever we're dealing with measuring these trees, you can actually be within an entire half log and still have a right answer for that portion of the Envirothon. Keep in mind, once again, is that going to affect your volume when you do your math? Yes. Another concept is to make sure that you're not adding wood. Do we create wood out of thin air? No. Also, we'll have trees that are sometimes taller than 4 tree lengths, or 4 logs. Anything over 4, we round back down to 4. We'll instruct the students that during the competition. So if we get answers like 4.5, not a right answer, right? If we get an answer like 5 or 6, not a right answer. The hardest part of this, and we're going to go over this some more, and take some good pictures for videos if we can, is knowing where to cut the tree off at. This is the number one part of this that the students will miss. They won't always miss this here. What they'll miss is they'll all have different opinions on where we should cut that tree off. I pointed it out for you guys for this tree. There's 3 ways that we determine that. One being, we'll run a tree up, especially like a straight pine like this, up to an 8-inch top. So if you picture a paint can, and you picture a paint can up there where I told you, isn't that about the size of a paint can from up there? About. So we can measure it straight up until it tapers to 8 inches. The next reason we'd cut a tree off would be for major forks. If it's a major fork that takes up 50% of the diameter of the tree, that's where we'll cut it off at. Even if it continues to go, you'll cut it off at the major fork. The other reason, the third and last reason, would be a major defect. So if you come up and it's got a big rotten spot or a huge knot that takes up more than 50% of the diameter at that spot, that's going to be where you cut that tree off at. Does that make sense to everybody? It's going to be an 8-inch top, a major fork, or a defect. All right? Okay. So we'll find some of those examples here for you guys. So the question was asked, will it just be one tree? It'll actually probably be multiple trees. Every tree that they have to get volume for, they'll also have to ID. So it'll usually be 3 to 5 trees. It's usually, a lot of times, it's 3 trees to do volume, maybe 2 trees just to identify, not to have to get measurements from. Each of those will require that you get the diameter. Each one will require that you get the height, the merchantable height, number of logs. Then you will cross those on the multiplication table we provide, right? That will give you the volume. We could ask that they give us a total volume for all 3 of those trees. So after you get volume of 1, 2, and tree 3, add those together and that gives us the total volume of the trees measured. So yes, it could be multiple trees. Let's come over here and look at this poplar here. So it's a really good example of major forks and defects. So not the 2 mixed fork one here, but the one on back. If you look up there, you can see it's very straight, regardless of limbs. We don't consider sweep. Sweep is when a tree gets really crooked. We don't worry about that in this competition. So as it goes really tall and straight, and it gets up to those major forks, that's where we would cut this tree off at. Does that make sense to everyone? Very good. So what we'll probably do now is take you guys way out there, because there's a couple really good examples that you can try to get the heights on. We're going to practice this one more time. We practiced this many times as we could, but we're short on time. The reason that this is so important for you guys to practice is because it does add up to a fair amount of points for the Envirothon Forestry part of the competition, right? So you end up getting points for diameter, for height, you get points for volume, and you could even get points for the total volume once it's added. So keep in mind, this is an important part to practice, practice, practice. And your pace and all these things end up adding together to create this part of the competition. So let's take this large tree here for an example. Is it pretty clear? Where would we cut that tree off at? So,
Just a little below it too. Even.
right, so the major fork. Now she mentioned just a little bit below it. In real life, yes. And remember, that's why we can gauge and say you can be a half of a tree off, right? 8 foot up there doesn't make a big difference. But we want to be fair on the competition. So yes, you can cut a little bit low, some people do a little high, as long as they were looking for that major fork. Us as people on the test days, we're going to be looking for things that are really good examples, just like this here. So I want everybody to come over and do their pace once again and try to get and see what our merchantable height is of this tree. So come on over. Okay. Remember, don't stop just because your buddy stops, right? We want to see how close we can get. And we're just going to walk right around the hill here. So 3, 2, 1, go.
Obviously, taking a completely different angle than everyone else.
Yeah. So, when you go up or down the hill, does it change your pace? Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we try to go as on contour as we can. All right. So let's kind of split the difference here. As long as we're all staying in the same place here to practice, so you can back on up here. So remember, turn to your merit hypsometer side of your stick with a little arrow pointing down. Hold it to where you're 25 inches from your eye and have the base of the stick 1 foot from the uphill side of the ground. And you're going to cut it off at the major fork. I'm going to come around just to see if everybody's doing everything correctly. Very good. Okay. So has everybody got an answer? Okay, so what was your answer? 3, 2,
2.5.
2.5, 2.5. So the answer is more closer to 2. All right. Remember, we don't add wood. Better be safe than sorry, right?
Oh yeah, you did say that once.
Yeah. So we can't add. That's how you guys ended up with 2.5. So it's going to go down to the next half log, which would be 2. Now 2.5, would that have been an acceptable answer? Yeah. So for having a little bit extra, it could be the difference of holding your stick a little too far away or being up or down the hill. Right? So it just takes practice. But no, that's a good answer. So that's a good way to practice for that. So very good. We are done on time.